In this chapter, we are going to discuss adding conditional CSS or JavaScript. There's going to be some scenarios where you're going to want a unique file, either JavaScript or CSS, to only be called on certain pages, and we're going to walk you through that process. So my designer has come to me and said, we want the background of the front page only to be pink. And there's a bunch of other things we want to happen on this front page. So I'm going to walk you through the steps of how we are going to accomplish that. We previously learned that in template.php, you can create pre-processed functions that get called at the node level or the page level. And we're going to dive into the pre-processed page function. And I'm going to introduce you to some more functions to do those conditional styles. So let's go to our code. In template.php, you're going to look for your pre-processed page function. And the first thing that we want to do is actually a test to see whether or not we are on the front page before we go ahead and choose to add in our new file. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of my content in that function, and we'll do our little test here. Our $variables has an item that's a Boolean for whether or not you're on the front page. So it's very easy for us to do that test. So if isFront equals true, then we want to do something. We want to call this special file. So this is where we're going to introduce a Drupal function called Drupal add CSS. Now, in order to figure out what parameters this function takes, we're actually going to head over to api.drupal.org and search for the Drupal add CSS function. We'll see that it takes two different options, $data and $options. $data is going to be the path of the CSS file that you want to include. So I'm going to go ahead and type in front.css. So Drupal won't know exactly where your style sheet is unless we explicitly put the path in. So there's another function that we can use, which is called path_theme. The path_theme function will actually take what this active theme that we're using right now, the theme that we're in, and it'll take the entire URL for us. So we'll use that. We'll concatenate it then to our style sheet. Our style sheet's actually living in the CSS folder, so we'll put our slashes in there and wrap that string with single quotes. Okay, so I want to now go take a look and see where Drupal puts this style sheet that I've told it to add. So we are going to go ahead and clear our caches just to make sure it recognizes there's a new file in there. We'll go back to the home page. Right now, we're not actually seeing any changes. I'm not noticing anything is pink. So let's use our Firebug to figure out why. If we go into the head section, you'll see right here we have all of our style sheets and then our scripts. And I'm actually going to debug this from the bottom up of the style sheets. Okay, the last three style sheets being called are from our current theme, 960 robots. I am not actually seeing our front.css style sheet. However, when I open the next grouping, we'll see that in addition to some of these module level style sheets, we do have our style sheet listed right there. So it's great that it's getting printed out, but because our 960 robots also has information about the background color on the body tag, we need to make sure that this one is called last. So if we go take a look at the function that we used for Drupal add CSS, we can then determine how we need to place this. So I'm going to head over to api.drupal.org, and we are looking at the Drupal add CSS function. The first parameter that we already put in there is the path to the file, and the second parameter, $options, is something that is actually completely optional. So as we look down of what we can include in here, there is something called group, and we can use some defaults variables that Drupal provides us to say, how do we want this style sheet put in and organized? So I'd like to go ahead and try that out and see what happens. So let's add in our group. Now all of those options are passed in as an array. And the item that we are going to be putting in there is the group. And we want to use the CSS theme as our first trial for those variables. So let's see where this puts our style sheet. So I went ahead and hit save. We're going to head back to our site and do a refresh, and wow, it's pink now. So something's working. Let's take a look. So we'll open up our head again, and our last one is our front.css, and the ones before it are our other 960 robot style sheets. So that worked exactly as desired. Now there are other couple options that we can take a look at in here. Sometimes you might want a style sheet to display on every page. Unfortunately, the more standard way of doing that is actually through your .info file, like we discussed in previous chapters. But there's a lot of other options. The thing that I would recommend you do is play with the group. And I know, because I did a little digging in the code, that CSS theme is equivalent to a number of 100. We actually could have went in here and typed 100. Or if we really wanted to guarantee that our file was going to be put in last, we could pick a group of 1000. So all this value is a number, and CSS theme is a constant that has already been created for us to use, so we don't need to remember the numbers. Other options that we can include in here is if we get the correct grouping. Let's say our style sheet, we wanted it added into, let's say, this grouping right here, but we wanted to make sure it was at the top or at the bottom. We also can utilize the weight. So things are first ordered by group, and then we look at the every page flag, and then we take a look at the weight. So what that would look like in code if we wanted to do that, we put a comma to add a second parameter, and we can type weight. And again, this is going to be an integer, a negative or positive number. And if we want it to be the top of a group, we can do, say, -10. The lighter numbers float to the top, the heavier numbers sink to the bottom. So Drupal add CSS is a wonderful function, especially when you utilize it with the if statement wrapped around it. But we're saying, if on the front page, I want you to include this one file. Drupal doesn't need to include it on every single page, just the one that you tell. In conjunction with Drupal add CSS, we also have another file, and I'll take you to the API page for that. It is very similar. It's Drupal add JS. So you can do the exact same technique that we just went through with style sheets for JavaScript files. That's really handy if you have a special design for a certain content type. You can go into your code in your preprocessed node and say, if I'm looking at such and such content type, go ahead and add in a JavaScript file. So just to recap, we went into our preprocess page function because this gets called once on every page load. We went and tested a condition. Is this the front page? And then we added, using the Drupal add CSS, our style sheet. In order to get the path correct, we used another function called path_to_theme, and then concatenated the location of our style sheet relative to the root of our theme. The second parameter we added was an array, where we first specified the group we wanted our style sheet to show up in. And then secondly, we could have also specified within that group what is the weighting. A lot of information is available on api.drupal.org. that goes through all of the possible options you can configure with this, but we went over the two most common ones.